name is Marcus Cupola. I'm a registered psychotherapist, and you might remember me from such videos as "You're Not Funny" and "Just Tell Us How to Fix It." I wanted to talk to you about content versus process today. This is one of the common issues that comes up for me in couples therapy. Arguments will often start over nothing, and couples even minutes later will say, how did that happen? Well, what often happens is we get sucked into a detail about something. Say the dishwasher, who did or didn't unload it. And then we'll try and focus on the details because what's ultimately happening is we're trying to be right. And this is why content is such a terrible hook, because often one or both of you are right. And that's the hook, that's what keeps us, drawing us in. We want to prove the other person wrong. Even if somebody says, well, no, I'm not trying to make them wrong, I just want them to see this, or I just want them to understand this. That's still the process of being right. And the process of being right is unhelpful because if there's two of you in an argument and one of you is right, what position is the other person going to be in? They're going to have to be wrong. Well, they don't want to be wrong, so they're going to do what everybody does when they're put in a position where they're wrong. They're going to fight to not be wrong. They're going to fight to be right. So the process of focusing on details and the process of trying to be right is unhelpful because ultimately that's not where you want to be in your relationship. Right? Being right leads you to arguing and angriness and unhappiness and disagreements. Well, that's not where you want to be, so trying to be right is an unhelpful process. Now you might notice I'm not saying it's a wrong process. It's because we're looking at it conceptually differently. We don't want to be right and wrong. What we want is to focus on the process. So it's a different way of looking at it. It's much like pool. Now, I don't know if you play pool or not. If you do, this will make sense. If not, hopefully you can follow along. When you're playing pool, there's two ways to win. One is you actually win the game through your own skill and you sink all the balls and you sink the 8-ball. The other way to sort of win is if the other person loses. Now on a scorecard, this counts as a win. But if you're thinking about the process, only in the instance where I commit the actions that lead myself to, having the higher score, count as a win. Whereas if the other person scratches, which for those of you who don't know, at the very end, you're supposed to sink the 8-ball into a pocket. And there are various rules about how this counts, but the bottom line is, it has to be my turn and I have to put the ball in the hole. Now, if I mess that up, sorry about the cut, there was a loud noise in the background. So for those of you who don't know, to sink the 8-ball, you have to sink it on your turn. Now, if I make a mistake while I sink it, that's called scratching, and then I lose the game. So if I win by virtue of the other person, failing, I didn't win, I did not beat them, they lost. Now this is a different concept of looking at it, and this is what I'm challenging you to do with the always being right versus the process. It's not about being right, it's not a new way of rephrasing the argument, so that, well, we're right, but we're just talking about it in a different manner. That's not it. It's a different way of thinking about it, much like a different philosophy. So if you're thinking about it in terms of this is a process that's gone wrong. It's something that happens between us, and it's led me to a place I don't want to be. I get unhappy, I get angry, we fight, we argue. I mean, at that point, does being right actually matter? Because what are we trying to accomplish when we're right? Well, what we're trying to do is resolve the situation, and we want one or hopefully both of us to be happy. So being right doesn't lead us to happiness. That's why it's an unhelpful process. So by focusing on the process, we can then start to identify, well, what has gone wrong? And if you can think to yourself, well, what did trigger me here? What was the actual problem for me? I felt insulted, I felt degraded, I felt ignored, I felt talked down to. If I can identify what's actually happened for me, which has then resulted in me arguing, then I can start to address that with the other person. And vice versa. They can't make me happy if we don't know what's going on. You might be saying to yourself, well, that's great, Marcus, but how does that help me? Well, like anything, the first step is recognizing what the problem is. And if you can recognize that it's a process that's gone wrong and not your actual partner, then you can start to address what's really happening. Also, if you're focusing on the process, you can think about how I can contribute to it and how I contribute to a negative process, for example, by focusing on the details as opposed to the process. And now it's about, well, I felt insulted. Now, we do need to stay away from "you insulted me." That type of language isn't helpful. That's you language. But if I can recognize that I have felt something, then we can talk about the process. And then instead of me and you arguing over who's right, you and me together can work on, well, it's us versus the problem, and the problem is this process is broken. We get sucked into right and wrong. And what we need to do is we need to talk about what actually happened. Because what actually happened isn't about the dishwasher. What actually happened is something between us. While it's tempting to focus on the other person, unfortunately you can only do what you can do. And you are responsible for your own behavior and your own reactions. Now, that's not to say that the other person did or didn't do something right or wrong, but the point being, you focus on your reactions and your own awareness of what's going on in the process. By starting to be aware of what's going on around you, you can then start to be aware of what you need to do to work on it and to improve your situation. So with that, it's time to end. Thank you for watching. If you like this, please hit like, share it with other people. Subscribe if you'd like to see what videos I come up with next. I'll talk to you next time. Thank you.